Some of the prettiest mountains in Europe have factories inside them. Green in summer, white in winter, the scenery a country puts on its stamps. In the last 2 years of the Second World War, the German war economy went looking for somewhere the bombers couldn't reach, and it found the inside of those mountains. Prisoners were sent to hollow them out. We found 10. Stay for number 1, because in a hill above the Austrian town of Ebensee, there are kilometers of galleries big enough to drive a lorry through, cut by men whose deaths the SS wrote down and filed. Most of them were dug by people who didn't survive the digging, and several are memorials now, with the names kept. We're counting up from the ones you can almost walk into to the one that still counts its dead. Number 10. Kobánya, Budapest, Hungary. Under the 10th district of Budapest, there's a maze of tunnels, somewhere around 30 kilometers long, and most of the city walking about above it has no idea the maze is there. The Kobánya cellars began as a limestone quarry in the Middle Ages, first written into a royal charter in the 13th century. The stone that built the Hungarian parliament, the chain bridge, and the state opera house was cut out of here and carted up to the surface. When the quarry closed in the 1890s, after the roofs began to collapse, the brewers moved in. Cool, dark, and enormous, the tunnels were ideal for lager, and the Dreher brewery still uses part of them. But in 1944, with Allied bombers over the city, the Danube aircraft factory went underground into the same cellars. Down in the damp, out of reach of the raids, workers assembled Daimler-Benz engines and parts for the Messerschmitt fighter, and turned out more than 200 of them before the end. One of the workers, Rezo Poslovsky, came down here in the summer of 1944 and left an account of it before he died in 2016. Then the Red Army reached the edge of Budapest, and the whole operation was pulled out and shipped back to Germany, engines and all, while thousands of civilians moved into the tunnels to shelter from the siege above. Today, parts of the maze grow mushrooms, parts flood with groundwater, and cave divers pay to swim the sections nobody has bothered to drain. The beer is still brewed a few meters above the tunnel where the fighter engines were built. Number 9. The Seegrotte, Hinterbrühl, Austria. Just south of Vienna, there's a gypsum mine with a lake at the bottom of it. And the lake is the largest underground body of water in Europe. It got there by accident. In 1912, a blasting charge broke into a hidden reservoir, and 20 million litres of water came through the rock and drowned the lower workings overnight. The mine sat abandoned and flooded for 30 years. Then, in the autumn of 1943, the SS opened a subcamp of Mauthausen at the mine, pumped the water back out, poured a concrete floor across the drained level, and handed the hall to the Heinkel Aircraft Company under the codename Langusta. Around 1,800 prisoners and 300 skilled workers built fuselages down there for the Heinkel He-162, a cheap little jet the Luftwaffe called the Volksjäger, the People's Fighter. They finished 198 of them and sent the shells on to be completed at an airfield near Vienna. The camps ran under an SS officer named Anton Streitwieser, who commanded the whole string of Heinkel sites. As the war closed in, the SS shot 51 prisoners during the evacuation and marched the rest back towards Mauthausen. Almost none of them survived the walk. When the guards tried to blow the mine, they only managed to wreck the pumps, and the water came straight back in. It reopened as a tourist attraction in 1949. You buy a ticket, climb into a flat-bottomed boat, and float across the exact stretch of water where the fighters were built. Number 8. Monte Soratte, Lazio, Italy. About 45 kilometers north of Rome, a single limestone mountain stands up out of the plain with a village on its shoulder. The Romans thought Monte Soratte was sacred and put a temple to Apollo on the summit. In 1937, Mussolini's engineers began cutting a bunker into the base, around 4.5 kilometers of tunnels dug under cover of a story about a munitions factory. This one wasn't built by prisoners. It was dug by the Italian army for the Italian government, a bomb-proof seat to run the country from if Rome were ever besieged. But Italy surrendered in 1943, and within days the Germans took the mountain instead. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring moved his headquarters inside and ran the German defence of Italy from the tunnels for the better part of a year. When the Allies bombed the mountain in the spring of 1944, the Rock shrugged it off. And when Kesselring pulled out, he is supposed to have buried crates of gold looted from the Bank of Italy somewhere in the galleries, well over 100 tons of it, by the loudest version of the story. Teams have gone in with ground-penetrating radar. Nobody has found a bar of it. The mountain kept collecting uses after that. The Italian army stored gunpowder in it through the 1950s, and in the 1960s, NATO turned a section into an atomic bunker for the Italian president, sitting on 2,500 seismic isolators, before the whole place was finally decommissioned. Today, volunteers run tours past Cold War blast doors and a folded-wing aircraft still parked in a tunnel, ready to taxi out. Number 7. Rabštejn, near Česká Kamenice, Czech Republic. In a wooded sandstone canyon in the north of Bohemia, the Kamenice River runs past a row of old textile mills, and behind them the cliffs are full of holes. The holes are the mouths of an underground aircraft factory, about 4.5 kilometers of galleries cut straight into the soft sandstone. In 1942, the Reich seized the local mills and handed the whole valley to Weser Flugzeugbau of Bremen, whose own works had been bombed flat. Around 6,000 people ended up labouring in the valley, and by August 1944, the SS had added a concentration camp, a subcamp of Flossenburg, holding roughly 650 men from 18 countries, put to work carving tunnels and building parts for Junkers and Messerschmitt aircraft. If you're finding these worth your time, subscribe, because there's a version of this list for every corner of Europe, and we're steadily working through them. And keep an eye on number 1, because the deepest and the deadliest of the lot is still to come. 56 of the Rabštejn prisoners died in the sandstone. Some of them under a deputy guard, remembered for beating a man to death for falling asleep at the tunnel face. The galleries are unstable now, and mostly sealed. A local heritage association keeps one small museum section open and takes visitors through by arrangement, in booked groups, well in advance. The rest of the labyrinth stays shut, with the river running past the entrances the way it did before anyone thought to dig into the cliff. Number 6. Porta, Westfalica, North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany. Where the river Weser cuts through the Wehen Hills, a colossal stone monument to Kaiser Wilhelm I stands on the ridge. Directly beneath it, inside the hill, is a 4-story factory. From March 1944, the SS ran 3 subcamps of Neuengamme here, and sent the prisoners into the old mine tunnels of the Jakobsberg and the Wittekinsberg to widen them into production halls under the tunnelling programme of SS General Hans Kammler. The largest project, codenamed Dax-1, was meant to be a bomb-proof oil refinery, and by the end of the war it was about 90% finished. In the tunnels above it, the electronics firm Philips installed machinery and set around 1,000 women, most of them Jewish prisoners from Hungary and the Netherlands, to making radio valves and light bulbs for the Wehrmacht. Under the monument itself, other prisoners turned out ball bearings and anti-tank parts. The men's camp sat in the ballroom of the Hotel Kaiserhof across the river, where the first prisoners had arrived from Buchenwald, under the innocuous code name Max 1, and where the historian Rainer Frobe counted between 500 and 600 deaths in a single year. When the Americans arrived, the machines were still down there, and half the tunnels were still raw rock. After the war, the hotel ballroom that had held the prisoners was swept out and turned into a riding hall for horses. Number 5. Malachit, Langenstein-Zwieberge, Germany. In an isolated valley in the Harz Mountains, 4 kilometers from the town of Halberstadt, A tunnel system runs into the Theckenberger Hills for the better part of 13 kilometers. The Germans codenamed it Malachit and gave the tunnel itself the grander name of Hermann Göring. From April 1944, it was a subcamp of Buchenwald, built to hide an engine works for the Junkers Aircraft Company underground, and the prisoners who dug it came in their thousands. This is the one where the arithmetic stops making ordinary sense. A man sent to work the tunnel face here had a life expectancy of about 6 weeks. Not 6 weeks in the camp. 6 weeks from the day the digging started. Somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 prisoners passed through, and roughly a third of them never came out. If Malachit had been the worst of these places, this would already be a bleak enough list. It wasn't the worst, and number one is still coming. When American troops neared in April 1945, the SS marched around 3,000 prisoners out of the gate and into the countryside. 500 of them were still alive at the end of the march. The soldiers who reached the camp found roughly 1,500 people too ill to move, and a card index with more than 6,000 names in it. The galleries the prisoners died to cut never turned out a single finished engine. Number 4. Quarz, Melk, Austria. On the Danube at Melk, under the shadow of one of the grandest Baroque abbeys in Austria, the army had a set of old barracks. In April 1944, the SS turned them into a subcamp of Mauthausen and marched the prisoners a few kilometers inland to a hill called the Wachberg, near the village of Roggendorf. Inside the hill, under the codename Quarz, they cut a tunnel system for Steyr-Daimler-Puch, the firm run by Georg Meindl, who had been the first industrialist in Austria to put concentration camp prisoners on his production lines. The plan was ball bearings, and by the end of 1944, the finished galleries were turning them out. Melk was one of the largest subcamps in the entire Mauthausen system. Over 14,000 men were sent here from more than 20 countries, and the population peaked past 10,000 in a single month early in 1945. At least 4,800 of them died, worked to pieces on the rock, or killed by the dust and the cold, and the SS built a crematorium on site to keep up with the bodies. It burned more than 3,500 of them. The barracks are a memorial today, and the crematorium has been a protected monument since 1962. Above it, the abbey still runs its tours, and most of the coach parties climbing the hill for the library and the frescoes never learn that the tunnel is a few minutes down the road. Number 3. Richard, Litoměřice, Czech Republic. Beneath a low hill called the Bydnice, near the Czech town of Litoměřice, there was an old limestone mine. In the spring of 1944, the SS began enlarging it into 2 underground factories, codenamed Richard I and Richard II, and set up the largest subcamp of Flossenburg to supply the labour. More than 18,000 prisoners were sent through the camp. About 4,500 of them died, a great many in a dysentery epidemic in the winter that followed. Richard I went into production for a front company of Auto Union. From late that year, prisoners underground were assembling the Maybach engine that powered the Panther and the Tiger, the heaviest tanks the German army had. Richard II, meant for the electrical firm Osram, never really got going, and here's the detail most accounts of this place leave out. The tunnels didn't fall silent after the war. Since 1964, part of the Richard II complex has been the Czech Republic's store for institutional radioactive waste, sealed behind concrete and monitored to this day. The engine galleries where prisoners died building tanks now hold the country's low-level nuclear waste in the same mountain on the same rails. Above ground, the camp crematorium is a memorial kept by the same institution that looks after the records at nearby Terezín. Number 2. Kaufering, Landsberg, Germany. In the flat farmland around Landsberg in Bavaria, the plan was the most ambitious of the lot. 3 enormous bunkers, each an arched concrete shell, together meant to build 900 Messerschmitt Me 262 jet fighters a month, with tens of thousands of labourers across the three. The project was codenamed Ringeltaube. To pour the arches, the Germans built a ring of 11 subcamps of Dachau and filled them, from the 20th of June 1944, with Jewish prisoners deported from Auschwitz. Kaufering was the largest and the deadliest of all the Dachau subcamps. Of roughly 30,000 people sent here, about half died of hunger, of typhus, of exhaustion, or shot on the death marches at the very end. One of the men who lived through it was the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book that came out of the camps afterwards. This was the same machine that was grinding away in the mountain above Ebensee, the place waiting for you at number 1, only here it was pouring concrete on a Bavarian plain. It killed on a scale the paperwork could barely keep up with, and not one finished jet ever left the site. Of the 3 great bunkers, only one was ever cast, the shell called WW2 near Igling. Its dome is 240 metres long, over 80 wide, and 3 metres of solid reinforced concrete, thick, poured over a mound of gravel because there was no timber to spare for the shuttering. It never assembled an aircraft. It's still there, and it's still fenced, because the German Air Force took it over in 1959, and it remains a military installation to this day. Number 1, Zement, Ebensee, Austria. At the far end of a long lake in the Salzkammergut, ringed by the postcard mountains, this whole list started with sits the town of Ebensee. Walk to the edge of it, and you'll find the mouths of tunnels driven straight into the mountain, and a memorial where the gate of a concentration camp used to be. The codename was Zement, cement. On the 18th of November 1943, the first 1,000 prisoners arrived from Mauthausen to start digging. The original idea was extraordinary. The Germans meant to move the entire rocket research program from Peenemünde up on the Baltic coast into the middle of an Austrian mountain, safe from the bombers, and carry on building the V2 and the weapons meant to come after it in the dark. When that plan fell apart, Hitler ordered the galleries turned over to tank gears and an oil refinery instead. Either way, the digging never stopped. Around 27,000 prisoners passed through Ebensee. They rose at 4:30, dug the tunnels until 6 in the evening, and later worked in shifts around the clock, with almost no shelter that first winter. The death rate climbed until, in the final weeks, more than 350 men were dying every single day, and the camp's population still peaked above 18,000, as transports poured in from other camps being emptied ahead of the Allies. Close to a third of everyone sent here died. More than 8,200 people died at Ebensee, and the SS counted them as they went, because the paperwork mattered to them right to the end. In the last days, the commandant ordered every prisoner into the tunnels, meaning to seal them inside and blow the entrances. The prisoners worked out what was coming, and they refused to go in. Thousands of starving men simply stood at the tunnel mouths and would not move, and the order fell apart. American soldiers reached Ebensee on the 6th of May 1945, and what they photographed there is among the hardest evidence the whole war left behind. The galleries are still in the mountain. Most of the system has never even been properly surveyed, so nobody can say for certain how far it runs. One tunnel is open to visitors now, with an exhibition inside it, and the cemetery holds the men whose deaths were written down. I've stood at a lot of locked doors making these lists, and respected most of them. This is the one door I think everyone should walk through at least once. There are places under these mountains you can walk into because someone turned them into a museum. There are places you can't get into because the rock is coming down or because an army still owns the door. And there's Ebensee, where the tunnels are still open, the names are still kept. And the count the SS started is the reason we can still say how many died. What all 10 have in common is that the war went underground to hide. And in most of them, somebody kept a record of who did the digging. Some of these hills were opened up by an army, one or two by their own workforce, but most were dug by people who were never meant to come back out. Most of the jets and the tank engines never got built at all. What got finished, and what survives, is the record of who died building them. 10 of them today, from a brewery cellar in Budapest to a mountain that still counts its dead. The postcards look exactly as they always did. It's what sits underneath them that the records can finally account for. Subscribe and we'll go and find the next 10 together. Thank you.